I had been dead for 10 years, yet the memory of the fire that consumed me, and the man who watched it burn, was fresher than yesterday. Now I was back, returned to the day it all began, the day Daniel Wallace planned to use my family's wealth to cement his place in high society. This time I wouldn't just refuse him. I would systematically destroy every foundation he stood on. On the day Daniel was officially recognized as a legitimate member of the family, I personally came to offer my congratulations, just as I had in my previous life. This time I brought along 6 strong bodyguards. His entire family warmly held my hands, acting as if I were their most cherished daughter. "Let me introduce her to everyone," his father, Mr. Wallace, said with a beaming smile. "This is Chloe Hayes, the heiress of the Hayes Corporation." His mother immediately added, "And she's also going to be the future daughter-in-law of the Wallace family." Even his sister-in-law, Stella, gave me a sweet smile and said, "You're here. Our whole family is so happy to see you." In my previous life, they had treated me exactly the same way, surrounding me with sweet words and clever traps, making me believe Daniel's indifference toward me was simply because he was introverted and overly sensitive. I thought his coldness stemmed from pride, and I was determined to win him over, even if it meant enduring scolding from my family elders. I spared no effort, using every resource at my disposal to help him succeed. Daniel never refused my help, but years later when my family faced a major crisis, not only did he refuse to assist us, but he also joined hands with our competitors to destroy us. I will never forget the day he came to acquire my family's company. My father, barely holding on, finalized all the paperwork and suffered a fatal heart attack in the elevator on his way out. As I held my father's lifeless body in despair, the elevator doors opened to reveal Daniel, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He looked down at me coldly and said, "Miss Chloe, your support has fallen. Now do you want to be my wife or a ruined woman? The choice is yours." That moment felt like a bolt of lightning had struck me. I couldn't believe the ruthless, unfeeling man standing before me was the same boy who once showed me his vulnerable and helpless side. When I rejected him, he retaliated by pressuring my creditors to harass me, leaving me with no peace until I had no choice but to beg him for mercy. We were married for 8 years. During that time, Daniel never touched me. No matter how much effort I put into caring for the household or trying to prove my worth, one of the rooms in our home was dedicated entirely to a shrine for his first love, Isabel. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., he would insist that I light incense for her. Afterward, he would stay in the room alone for a while. I secretly eavesdropped a few times and heard him say things like, "Isabel, she deserves to grovel like a dog. If only you were still alive, we wouldn't have to torment each other like this. We would have been the happiest couple." I never understood what I had done wrong. Every time I tried to uncover the truth, his entire family would unite against me, accusing me of being a villain, blaming me for Isabel's death, and calling me an unrepentant sinner. But I genuinely didn't know what had happened. On the day Isabel jumped into the sea, I was busy organizing Daniel's birthday party. I didn't even see the message she sent me, "Wishing you happiness," until after the party ended. That was the first and only time she had contacted me directly, yet after her death, that message became the evidence of my alleged guilt. On our 8th wedding anniversary, Daniel asked me to drive him and Isabel's memorial tablet to a remote temple for a blessing. We had a car accident on the mountain road. I was trapped in the driver's seat, unable to move or call for help. Daniel, sitting in the back, wasn't seriously injured, but he deliberately delayed rescuing me. He stood there and watched as the car caught fire. Moments before the explosion, I screamed at him in despair, asking what Isabel's death had to do with me. He looked at me coldly and said, "In your next life, be a better person." But there is no next life. Today is the 2nd day since I've been reborn. My gaze swept past all the charming faces in the room and landed on Daniel, who was hiding at the back, pretending to be aloof. Hatred surged through me, and the pain of my past life washed over me again. "Daniel, congratulations," I said with a sharp smile. "You've officially been recognized. The Wallace family has finally accepted their illegitimate son." The atmosphere froze. His cunning father had only managed to secure his place in the Wallace family by using me as leverage, claiming that Daniel and I had been college classmates, and that I had pursued him passionately. That was the only reason he had the courage to confront his wife and force a reconciliation. Daniel's face turned crimson with embarrassment, his usually elegant features twisting as the color deepened. The lively atmosphere disappeared, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Mrs. Wallace gave Stella a subtle glance. Stella immediately lowered her voice and asked, "Chloe, did you and my brother have a fight?" I pulled my hand away from her grasp. In my previous life, before I married Daniel, I had always thought Stella was a kind and simple girl. She didn't show hostility toward the sudden appearance of a half-brother. Instead, she seemed eager to get along with him. But later I realized she was a master manipulator, even better at scheming than her mother. On the surface, she wished for me and Daniel to be happy together. But behind the scenes, she feared that with my family's support, Daniel would secure the inheritance rights to the company. She constantly schemed against us. After my family collapsed, she was the first person to kick me while I was down. Even after Daniel and I got married, she was the most frequent visitor to our home, always looking for ways to sow discord. Don't call me sister-in-law. You can't afford to ruin my reputation. I brushed past Stella and walked straight toward Daniel. He stood tall, more than a head higher than me, with deep, unreadable eyes and lashes so thick they cast shadows on his face. He always had that brooding look, as if hiding secrets too heavy for anyone to uncover. "They all say I'm your girlfriend," I said, tilting my head slightly. "I'm a little busy, so tell me, am I?" In my previous life, this point in time, Daniel always kept our relationship ambiguous. He neither accepted nor rejected me outright. It wasn't until I handed him a $30 million project to secure his foothold in the city that he finally admitted I was his girlfriend. Daniel glanced sideways, looking left and right as if searching for something or someone. Then, with a faint, almost indifferent tone, he countered, "What do you think?" I understood immediately. Someone in this room cared about his answer more than I did. Was it Isabel, hiding in some corner perhaps? "So, is it a yes or no?" I pressed, my voice sharp. "Be straightforward." Stella rushed over, laughing awkwardly to diffuse the tension. "Oh, Daniel, don't be so shy. Chloe wants to hear you say it loud and clear. Come on, don't be like a block of wood." Mrs. Wallace, Daniel's stepmother, also joined in with a smile, encouraging him to answer. After a long silence, Daniel finally spoke. His gaze met mine, and there was a flicker of resentment in his eyes. "Yes, you're my girlfriend." I clapped my hands together in mock surprise. "Oh my. I knew there was a misunderstanding. I don't like you and never wanted to be your girlfriend." The entire Wallace family turned to look at me, their expressions synchronized with confusion, then turned back to Daniel, their faces mirroring the same disbelief. "You're all crooked from the top down," I said, shaking my head. "Don't mention my name again. It's filthy." I strode over to Mrs. Wallace, giving her a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "Your husband's illegitimate son is older than your daughter. That must sting. Be careful. One day the father and son might join forces to set you up." With that, I turned and left the room, flanked by my bodyguards, walking out of the hall with my head held high. Just as I was about to leave the estate entirely, a girl dressed incongruously for the occasion ran after me, spreading her thin arms to block my path. She was trembling from head to toe, clearly terrified. "I want you to apologize to Daniel," she stammered, her voice shaking. It was Isabel. I scrutinized her for a few seconds and then asked, testing her resolve, "Do you think this is touching?" She lifted her chin stubbornly, tears welling in her eyes, and stared at me without responding. I sighed, exasperated. "Why should I apologize? Give me a reason." "No one can choose their origins," she replied, her voice trembling but determined. "You insulted him because of his background. That's your fault. You owe him an apology." Ridiculous. I looked past her at the guests who had started to gather behind me, then fixed her with a cold glare. He couldn't choose his origins, sure, but does that mean he can't die? The moment those words left my mouth, the expressions of everyone around me shifted drastically. Only Mrs. Wallace and her daughter revealed a glimmer of satisfaction in their eyes. "How can you be so cruel?" Isabel asked through tears, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel rushed over to her in just a few quick steps, his eyes filled with a hint of pity. "Isabel, stop it. Someone like her could never have empathy." I laughed coldly. Daniel, your very existence is an insult to the rightful wife. If you truly had any empathy, you wouldn't have gone through with this whole family reunion charade. Remember this. Every time I see you, I'll make sure to humiliate you. With a wave of my hand, I signaled my bodyguards to push the two of them aside. I walked a few steps away but suddenly stopped, as if remembering something. Turning back, I smiled mockingly at Stella. Don't worry, Stella. You're the legitimate daughter. If you ever run into trouble, you can always come to me for help. Hearing her name, Stella froze and instinctively glanced at her father before lowering her head slowly. Her mother responded on her behalf. Chloe, I know Daniel must have done something to upset you. I'll scold him for it later. Please don't be angry anymore, okay? Isabel cast a worried glance at Daniel, then lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Daniel seemed to take her reaction as a cue. He stepped closer to me, lowered his gaze and muttered, So I didn't respond to your messages for 2 days. Fine. I'm sorry. Can you stop making a scene? He had never been prompt in replying to my messages. In my previous life I had grown so used to it that I didn't even mind anymore. I had told myself it was because he had a difficult life and an introverted personality. I thought if I gave more and sacrificed more, it would eventually break down his walls and soften his sharp edges. But all it did was trap me in a toxic cycle, leaving me obsessed with fixing him. If you're truly sorry, I said calmly, then kneel and say it. Daniel let out a cold laugh, his voice low and bitter. I knew you've always looked down on me. Are you done playing games? So get lost. Get out of here. Is that your limit? What if I called you a little bastard? Daniel lunged at me, his face contorted with anger, but my bodyguard stepped in and restrained him just in time. Unbothered, I adjusted my coat and strolled away. The Hayes Corporation, a prestigious lineage with a 100-year history, had fallen because of internal decay, rats eating away at its core. Meanwhile, Daniel's Wallace family was nothing more than a nouveau riche clan that had ridden the wave of a favorable era. In my previous life, I had been blinded by foolish sentiment, giving them the chance to leech off my family's resources. Now that I've returned, everything starts anew. My priority is to prevent the Hayes Corporation's decline, and as for Daniel, my revenge will be swift and surgical, using the tools at my disposal. After leaving the Wallace estate, I got into my car and began reviewing the video recordings my bodyguards had captured. Miss Hayes, they've arrived, my bodyguard in the passenger seat said. I glanced out the window and saw 2 full buses parked not far away. From them emerged a bustling crowd of Daniel's relatives on his mother's side, all smiling brightly as they made their way toward the Wallace family's gated community. The sight startled the security guards, who spun in circles nervously before finally remembering to call for backup on their walkie-talkies. It's a pity Daniel's mother had been sent overseas. Otherwise, this would have been even more entertaining. I allowed myself a moment of regret. A few cars parked along the road had reporters inside who couldn't resist the spectacle. Camera lenses began to poke out of the windows, capturing the scene. The sunny weather was perfect for photos. With all this material, I'd make sure to spread the news far and wide, both online and offline. Daniel's mother's extended family, old neighbors, and acquaintances would surely be thrilled to see this. And of course, the rightful wife's sweet-talking uncles and aunts would need to be informed as well. Some of the uncles and aunts who regularly danced in the neighborhood square also lived nearby. They loved watching drama like this. Isabel had been Daniel's childhood neighbor and classmate. Her family was poor, and she nearly dropped out of middle school due to financial difficulties. It was Daniel's father who sponsored her education, allowing her to continue her studies. During college, Isabel attended a university in the same city as Daniel. The 2 schools were an hour and a half apart by bus. By all accounts, Isabel, coming from a struggling family, should have had no spare money, yet during her freshman year, she rented an apartment off campus, presumably to make it easier for Daniel to visit her there. There were plenty of pictures of the 2 of them online, documenting their time together, from youthful innocence to a more polished, mature image. Their clothes also became noticeably more expensive over the years. After graduating, Isabel joined the Wallace family company before Daniel, using the pretext of repaying her benefactor's kindness. She worked as an administrative assistant and over time became a long-term employee. In addition to her base salary, a separate account would deposit extra money into her account every month. As I reviewed the compiled information on my phone, I organized my thoughts. In college, Daniel and I were in the same department. During the second semester of our sophomore year, I fell for him at first sight during a debate competition. Before confessing my feelings, I asked him and the people around him if he had a girlfriend. Everyone said no. That was when I decided to pursue him. Looking back now, I realized I had been played from the very beginning. Even more ridiculous was how the ever-gracious Stella had been helping cover for them the entire time. All the while, I thought Daniel was a pitiful child held back by his parents. In my previous life, I never uncovered any of this even until my death. Now this newfound knowledge gave me plenty of material for exposure. A wave of well-edited leaks and revelations followed, meticulously timed. Within just a few days, Daniel's reputation was ruined in the social circles he had worked so hard to impress. Because of his clean-cut, pale and slender appearance, people started calling him Little White-Eyed Wolf in online comments. Some who loved stirring the pot even fabricated outrageous stories about his past. Leaked records showing Daniel's father secretly sending him money over the years also surfaced, clearly orchestrated by Mrs. Wallace. She had been closely following my lead, and even amplifying my efforts after I had someone tip her off that Daniel had planted a mole in their company. Her attacks on him became even more ruthless. It seemed Mrs. Wallace could tolerate infidelity in marriage, but she would never forgive having what belonged to her children taken away. Daniel should have thought harder about what made him believe he had the right to claim his place in the Wallace family. By Friday, I heard that Daniel had moved out of the Wallace estate. In front of Mrs. Wallace's family and friends, he swore never to use another cent of the Wallace family's money. He even relinquished ownership of all properties under his name. On top of that, Isabel had been fired from the company, and Daniel personally escorted her back to her hometown. I was in a fantastic mood. I even felt a sudden urge to invite Stella out for a meal to ask her for all the juicy details, but I restrained myself. Surprisingly, Daniel couldn't hold back and came to my house instead. It was pouring rain. He stood outside the iron gates of my villa, his face marred with visible scratches and bruises. James, the butler, wary of letting him in, held firm while Daniel shouted my name over and over, his voice desperate like a starving stray dog. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window on the second floor, holding a steaming cup of coffee, quietly watching him make a scene. It wasn't until he finally noticed me standing there that I nodded for someone to let him in. When we met face to face, he sneezed loudly, completely drenched from head to toe. His eyes and nose were red, making him look pitifully weak. I waited for him to speak, but he just stared at me intently, as if deliberately trying to evoke my sympathy. After a while, I lost patience and let out a heavy sigh. This carpet is quite expensive. If it gets wet, it'll be ruined, you know. Are you going to pay for it if you ruin it? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Daniel widened his eyes in disbelief, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to find his voice. Finally, he asked, "Can you tell me why? What exactly happened? I don't want things to end between us so inexplicably." In my past life, I had gone out of my way to treat him well, only for him to respond with curt, stingy words. Now that I was eager to get rid of him, suddenly he had so much to say. Piqued my curiosity, I propped my chin on my hand, watching him with amusement. "How did you convince Isabel to play along? She's been your official girlfriend for years. Even when she saw the two of us getting close, she didn't seem to mind. Did you already promise her she'd be your mistress? Or maybe your side chick?" For years, I had openly pursued Daniel. I never kept it a secret. Even the stray dogs on the streets must have known about it. Yet Isabel had never once come forward to clarify her relationship with him. It was baffling. Did she think Daniel was a promising investment worth her sacrifice? At the mention of Isabel's name, Daniel quickly lowered his head, avoiding my gaze, his hands hanging at his sides clenched into tight fists. After a long silence, he finally seemed to find an excuse and croaked out, "It's not what you think. I've only ever seen Isabel as a sister. You know, I've never had much family." He suddenly took 2 steps closer, his gaze unnervingly firm as he looked at me. "No one's ever respected me. It wasn't until I met you that I found a bit of confidence." Chloe, I've realized these past few days that you're all I truly have. Isabel is just my sister. I stared at him coldly. Sister, huh? She must have thought that purple is a very sophisticated color. My expression darkened and I clenched my fists. James, there's something filthy here. Help me get rid of it. As soon as I finished speaking, the butler and 6 bodyguards appeared. This had become a habit. Ever since Daniel had started harassing me, now I rarely went anywhere without security. Over the past few days I'd worked tirelessly to ruin Daniel's reputation, not just out of revenge but to ignite infighting within the Wallace family and bait their competitors into taking advantage of the chaos. Sure enough, rumors and scandals swirled around him, and trouble soon came knocking. Mr. Wallace found himself overwhelmed, his wife too busy fighting for power and moving assets to help him manage the mess. The company's leadership descended into chaos, and under mounting pressure, Mr. Wallace suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized. His wife didn't even visit him, seizing the opportunity of a leaderless family to promote her own relatives to key positions. I had been keeping a close eye on their company. Naturally, I struck while the iron was hot, teaming up with outsiders to carve up their projects, poach their key personnel, and corner them from all sides. My moves were precise, ruthless, and efficient, leaving my father astonished. Why are you suddenly targeting the Wallaces so aggressively? Their company isn't that big, he asked one day. I shrugged. Just because of a breakup. Revenge, you know. He frowned deeply. That's not right. Relationships are mutual. If it's over, it's over. You need to have the grace to accept the consequences. His words made me smile, but I said nothing. I lacked experience, so it was a perfect opportunity to practice. As their family was in turmoil, it would also prepare me for managing bigger projects in the future. With an air of righteousness, I said, "It's just normal business behavior, nothing personal really." My father clearly didn't believe me, but since he had always been dissatisfied with how I had prioritized Daniel over my career, now that I was focusing on business, he fully supported me. Be steady in your actions and ruthless in correcting mistakes, he advised as I threw myself into identifying and rooting out the internal issues in our company to prevent future crises. Just as I was so busy that I had almost forgotten Daniel even existed, he showed up with his father to visit mine directly. My father, naturally suspicious, couldn't understand why they would suddenly come knocking. By the time I rushed home from work, the 3 men were sitting in the living room, forcing awkward smiles. The tension in the air was palpable. After a quick greeting, I sat down next to my father, only for him to lean over and quietly ask me, "Are you back with him?" Before I could deny it, Daniel, encouraged by his father's approving nod, suddenly knelt before me on one knee. He pulled a diamond ring from the inner pocket of his suit. "Chloe, will you marry me?" My father's face darkened as he set his teacup down with a loud clink, his sharp gaze darting between me and Daniel. The pressure was suffocating. I immediately shook my head at my father, signaling that I had nothing to do with this. I didn't even know Daniel was planning this stunt. My father coughed, then turned to Daniel's father. Daniel's father quickly stood up, forcing a smile as he said, "Daniel and Chloe have been in love for many years. Their feelings are deep. There were some misunderstandings before, but now Daniel is about to take over the family business. I promise Chloe will never be wronged again." Daniel, his gaze unwavering, added, "I know you think I have ulterior motives, but I still want to try. I believe in your judgment, and I trust that you won't abandon me when I need you most. This is the best time to prove our love." His burning gaze made his intentions crystal clear. What he really meant was, "You want the best deal, and I'm the most suitable buyer you found so far. Isn't that right?" I asked, "Is this about selling yourself for a good price?" Daniel faltered, his expression strained as if bearing a great burden. "I understand you. You value relationships more than anything else. I want to show you through this gesture that I won't let you down. From now on we're family. I'm completely yours." At that, my father abruptly stood up and left without a word, heading upstairs via the elevator. Daniel's father awkwardly tried to smooth things over, his forced smile faltering. "Uncle, do you know about Isabel?" I asked with a faint smile. Daniel's father hesitated before responding. "What about her?" He knew full well about Isabel's relationship with his son. He might have even been the one coaching Daniel, teaching him to emulate his own behavior of keeping one woman at home while entertaining another on the side. Isabel is your son's true love. I'm just the fool paying for everything. Don't let him keep hurting me or I'll hold a grudge, I said softly, locking eyes with him as my smile deepened. He blinked rapidly, then turned to Daniel and without hesitation, kicked him to the ground. Did you betray Chloe? He roared. I had no intention of wasting any more time. Rising to my feet, I said coldly, that's enough. Stella and her mother have already told me everything. Stop pretending. With that, I walked away, leaving behind a room filled with awkward silence. Those words weren't baseless slander, though they were skillfully coaxed out of Stella and her mother by me. After delivering my parting shot, I left without looking back, taking the elevator up to the second-floor study to console my heartbroken father. I know you care about that boy, he began, his expression stern, his gaze sharp. But don't blame me for being ruthless. I won't allow the two of you to be together. Shameless people will stop at nothing. Stay away from him or you'll face nothing but ruin. In the study, my father's face was grave. Looking at the white hairs peppering his temples, I felt my emotions spiral out of control. He had said the exact same words in my past life, but back then I was blinded by my infatuation. I lashed out at him, accusing him of being a snob who looked down on the humble Wallace family. I even foolishly believed that Daniel's family treated me better than my own parents did. It turned out I had been too sheltered, too naive, unable to recognize the malice hidden in human hearts or distinguish genuine affection from manipulation. This time I walked over to my father, knelt beside him, and leaned my head against his leg. Dad, you're right. I've learned my lesson. I won't give him another chance. He'll never rise again. Before he could respond, I quickly changed the subject, forcing a cheerful tone to dispel the heavy atmosphere. The greatest threat to any business is internal corruption. Regular self-audits are essential to prevent long-term damage. The Wallace family is a perfect example of what happens when you don't look at the mess they're in now. Dad, we need to take their downfall as a lesson. We can't end up like them. Imagine us going to someone's house to propose and being thrown out. I hadn't blocked Daniel's contact information. He had a habit of sending me ridiculous messages, as if he were possessed by some tragic romantic hero. I found them amusing, using them as motivation to never forget the humiliation of my past life. Recently, though, he'd gone quiet. Concerned that something was happening in the Wallace family that I wasn't aware of, I discreetly had someone investigate his whereabouts. A few days later, I learned he was attending an investment promotion event. Sensing something suspicious, I cleared my schedule to attend as well. Exening Investment was a major player in the industry, and with Daniel's current standing, he shouldn't have been invited. Something was definitely up. When we crossed paths at the venue, I greeted him and the people around him with my signature polite smile. Hello, I'm Chloe Hayes from Zenith Group. May I introduce myself? A man standing beside Daniel extended his hand for a brief handshake. He pulled out a business card and we exchanged them. Hello, I'm Chen, he said. The embossed card identified him as the president of Exening Investment. I couldn't help but study the young man in front of me more carefully. His striking features were bold and intense, with deep-set eyes that exuded a predatory charm. His relaxed, laid-back demeanor gave him an air of effortless authority, as if any room he stood in instantly became his living room. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Chen, I said smoothly. Now I understand why my father always speaks so highly of you. You're truly a role model for our generation. He laughed heartily, not even bothering to feign humility. Your father's insight is something we younger folks should aspire to. His nonchalant confidence was both intriguing and unsettling, but I kept my expression composed, hiding the flicker of curiosity that stirred within me. In the end, his words seemed more like self-praise than anything else. Mr. Chen, let's head to the office and continue our discussion, someone suggested. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but when Daniel saw me chatting with Chen, a flicker of irritation flashed in his eyes. His tone carried a hint of anger when he interrupted. We'll meet again later, Miss Hayes. Liam gave me an apologetic smile before turning to leave with Daniel. The two of them, both tall and imposing, exuded confidence as they walked away. Their striking backs were surprisingly complementary, almost a perfect match. Based on various investigations and what I knew about Daniel from my previous life, I could already guess what he was planning. However, playing the role of a hero who saves the day wasn't as simple as he might think. A high-stakes agreement? How could that be possible? Stella fumed in frustration as we sat in a cafe. Who does Daniel think he is to make such a reckless decision? He's barely taken over the company. It's obvious he just wants to sell it off. I nodded in agreement. It's far too risky. A deal like this is akin to courting disaster. And besides, what makes him, an illegitimate son, qualified to run the company? Who knows if he's secretly funneling assets elsewhere? Stella gripped her phone tightly, her fingertips turning white. After a long pause, she looked at me with suspicion. Chloe, where did you hear this? I smiled softly. The investor he's negotiating with happens to be my type. I might pursue him. With that, the rumors I wanted to spread were set in motion. Later that evening, I invited Chen to dinner. At the table, he lounged in his chair with an air of casual elegance, gently swirling his glass of red wine. His long fingers tapped idly on the rim of the glass, and the tailored black shirt he wore accentuated his broad shoulders and smooth physique. You invited me to dinner, yet all you talk about is Daniel. Why not invite him directly? He asked, his deep voice tinged with amusement. Do I look that free to you? I forced a polite laugh. Extracting information was an art, and it was all the more challenging when the person across from you was a seasoned fox. Fine, I thought. Let's go with honesty. I took out a proposal from my bag and handed it to Liam. He opened it, and upon seeing the title, his brow arched slightly. He straightened in his seat as he read further. Shared economy, he remarked, his voice laced with intrigue. Miss Hayes, this concept is quite unique, very forward-thinking. It was just the advantage of being reborn, Mr. Chen. I trusted his judgment. Are you interested in partnering? Miss Hayes, if you're starting a business, you likely have no shortage of potential partners. Why choose me? It's not about me choosing you, I replied, meeting his gaze as I raised my glass. It's about whether you'll choose between Daniel and me. Pick one. My words were deliberate, measured. I wanted him to decide which project had greater value, which person was more worth his investment. I knew he was smart enough to figure it out. When we parted, light rain fell outside. Liam held an umbrella and walked me to my car. Our bodies were so close they nearly touched. As I opened the car door, he spoke in a low, velvety tone, his voice unexpectedly seductive. He's not worthy of you. I paused briefly, smiled faintly, and said goodbye to him. The internal strife within Wallace Corporation was severe, teetering on the edge of collapse. It had already become a topic of gossip within the industry. While I took advantage of the storm brewing in their family to clean up my own household, my actions appeared entirely justifiable. However, after uncovering more issues, my father refused to let me continue. He forcibly dragged me abroad to attend meetings. On Saturday, one of our foreign partners hosted a ball at their estate. My father, dealing with a headache, asked me to accompany a few senior executives in his place. I hadn't expected to see Chen in the grand hall. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his tall frame and confident posture standing out amidst the crowd of socialites. He moved through the bustling scene with grace and ease, exuding an effortless charm. The classical music, flowing through the room, seemed to exist solely for him. I set down my wine glass and approached him with a slight bow. I extended my hand in invitation. Mr. Chen, may I have this dance? His eyes lit up, and he returned the gesture with elegant composure. It would be an honor. I placed my hand on his shoulder while his arm encircled my waist. Our hands clasped and we moved in sync with the rhythm. The harmony between us was unexpectedly seamless. As the dance neared its end, the woman closest to me suddenly twisted her ankle, screaming as she fell toward us. Liam reacted swiftly, pulling me into his arms and out of harm's way. The woman collapsed unceremoniously at our feet. Feeling slightly embarrassed, I quickly bent down to help her up. However, she didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she addressed Liam in fluent French, teasing, "Such a perfect opportunity for a hero to save a damsel in distress." How could you let it slip away? Standing behind me with his hands clasped casually behind his back, Liam replied smoothly in French, his deep voice rich and melodious. I didn't let it slip away. Thank you for the opportunity. The woman arched a brow, feigning disappointment before turning to me. In clumsy Chinese she said, "Hello, beautiful." This small incident, unexpected as it was, lightened my mood. It reminded me that life could still be carefree and filled with joy. However, mindful of my father's health, I didn't stay at the estate too late and left early. Driving down the winding mountain road, I noticed a car suddenly appear behind me, tailgating aggressively as if it intended to ram into my vehicle at any moment. I immediately realized it was a deliberate act of retaliation. Recently, I had been investigating accounts and had fired several freeloading relatives and long-serving staff from the company. Though I had provided them with proper compensation, they remained dissatisfied. The memory of my death in my previous life, crushed, contorted, and obliterated in a violent explosion, flashed through my mind. My heart raced, but I clenched the steering wheel tightly, vowing not to meet the same fate again. Steadying my nerves, I floored the accelerator and maneuvered through several sharp turns. Just as I thought I had created some distance and reached for my phone to call for help, a blinding white light beamed directly at me from the front. I couldn't see anything. Panicking, I swerved the wheel hard. A split second later, a deafening crash echoed, and the car shook violently. The airbag deployed, slamming into me with force. Dizzy and disoriented, I couldn't afford to linger. I unbuckled my seatbelt, grabbed my phone, and stumbled out of the car. I staggered toward the woods, running as fast as I could. No matter what, I couldn't just sit and wait for death. Behind me, I heard the heavy, chaotic sound of footsteps. At least 2 people chasing me. I pushed myself to run downhill, dodging branches and stones, until a figure suddenly appeared from below. It was Liam. He had noticed something was wrong at the crash site on the mountain road, and immediately drove to the next curve, climbing up to find me. Before long, we made it back to the main road. I got into his car, and we sped away, having narrowly escaped death. I wiped the blood off my face and began laughing uncontrollably. Are you okay? Liam asked, startled. Surviving a disaster means future blessings, I said, still chuckling. Do you believe that, Liam? Believe? Sure. I believe whatever you say. You could tell me the moon is the sun right now, and I'd believe you, he replied. I glanced at the bright moon ahead, its glow illuminating the night. Smiling faintly, I let out another small laugh. The car raced down the road. The ride was far from smooth. At some point, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed. The police, Liam, my father, and others were all gathered around me. Daniel was reportedly on a plane and would arrive soon. After giving my statement to the police, I reached for my phone, but Liam suddenly spoke up. I froze mid-motion. What's he coming for? I asked. Who knows? Liam replied. It's not like this has anything to do with him. Does he know how to treat patients or solve crimes? My father chimed in with a sarcastic tone. Exactly. But when he turned to Liam, his voice softened and he smiled warmly. Thanks to you, Liam. When you're back home, come to our house for dinner. Your aunt would love to cook for you. Of course, I'd be happy to visit, Liam replied graciously. How did Daniel even find out about my accident? I asked, turning to Liam. He hesitated briefly before answering. On the way to the hospital, you kept calling out Daniel's name. He was calling your phone at the same time, so I picked up. As soon as he heard about the accident, he insisted on coming over. It's obvious he cares about you. I vaguely remembered fragments of disjointed dreams. Daniel forcing me to kneel before Isabel. Him locking me out in the freezing cold one winter morning. His father making lewd comments about me while Daniel stood by silently. I also saw the breathtaking autumn sunset on the day of our wedding anniversary, just before Daniel left me behind to escape our crashed car. Be a good person in your next life. His voice echoed from every direction, repeating over and over. It wasn't until the car exploded that I was finally freed. When Daniel arrived, hurried and disheveled, my father didn't even bother greeting him before leaving, assigning a few bodyguards to stay and guard me. The air grew awkward, and Daniel seemed visibly uncomfortable. The doctor standing nearby hesitated to speak. Daniel fidgeted nervously, unable to bridge the silence. I didn't help ease the tension. Instead, I watched him coldly. After a long moment, he forced an unnatural smile. "Are you okay?" I shook my head slightly and replied in a distant, polite tone. "Thank you for coming to see me. I'm fine now." "You should go back," I said calmly. Daniel's smile stiffened on his face. "If you're leaving, I can reimburse your round-trip ticket," I added kindly. For a moment, his eyes burned with anger, as though he wanted to retort, but he held back. Turning away, he stood silently for a long time before speaking in a hoarse voice. "Chloe, don't forget, you were the one who came after me first. Don't bring up the past," I replied with a sigh, sounding almost tired. "I find it humiliating too." He looked as though my words had hit him like a whip. "You know," I continued, "in life or death situations, it's easy for a girl to mistake gratitude for affection toward her savior. But Daniel, I already like someone else. From now on, please keep your distance. I don't want my reputation to suffer because of you." Daniel whipped around, the vein on his temple twitching. "Chloe, are you playing me? If that's what you want to think, I can't stop you." I looked at him with genuine sincerity, but the sight of his trembling frame made me quickly add, "Isn't Isabel the one you love? Don't worry, I won't bother you anymore. Take this chance to treasure her properly." He took a deep breath, his eyes swirling with storms of emotion. In the end, there was only a trace of desperation left. "Chloe, please help me out this one time. I don't want to lose. Stop dreaming." A heavy silence stretched between us before his expression twisted with anger. Suddenly, he lunged toward me, arms outstretched. His face was contorted with rage. Before he could reach me, my bodyguards quickly stepped in, grabbing him by the arms and dragging him back. "You be asterisk 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 asterisk. You turn your back on me just like that? What did I ever do to you?" he screamed. His red-rimmed eyes filled with fury as he struggled against their grip. I stood unmoved, a faint smile playing on my lips as I watched him being dragged away. The Wallace family's mess had already reached the point where they couldn't function without him. For Daniel to leave everything behind and fly abroad to see me, it meant he had already realized that staying was meaningless. I was his last hope, and the Hayes Corporation was his only escape route. My suspicion was quickly confirmed when I learned that the Wallace family's finances were on the verge of collapse and had attracted the attention of regulatory authorities. An audit could strike at any moment. In my past life, this was how the Hayes Corporation fell too, which was why I had acted so urgently this time, even if it brought trouble upon myself. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital and flew back home. As soon as we left the airport, my father called Liam and invited him over for dinner. When I got home, Liam was already sitting on the sofa in our living room, chatting and laughing with my mother. The two of them seemed as close as a mother and son. Feeling slightly jealous, I rushed over and clung to my mother's arm like a spoiled child. "Mom, I almost couldn't see you again." Her eyes turned red, and she hugged me tightly. "You nearly scared me to death. You should thank Liam properly. If it weren't for him, how could I go on?" Hearing her words, I suddenly remembered how in my past life, after marrying Daniel, my mother disliked him so much that she insisted on living alone. I wondered, when Daniel had heard about my accident, was there anyone by his side to comfort him? Or was he completely shattered, his heart broken into pieces? During dinner, my parents were so overwhelmingly warm toward Liam that it almost felt excessive. Under the table, I discreetly kicked Liam's foot and whispered, "Notice anything unusual?" Liam turned his head slightly, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "What?" I raised a brow. "In situations like this, all you need to do is casually mention you have a girlfriend, and you'll be off the hook." He playfully ran his fingers through the strands of hair brushing his forehead, feigning innocence. "Why would I want to escape? Your parents keep praising me, it's quite flattering. Don't you feel the same?" After dinner, I walked Liam out, but before we could get far from the gate, we spotted Daniel pacing under a street lamp. He looked exhausted, with heavy bags under his eyes. Though his beard was freshly shaven and his clothes were meticulously neat, it was clear he had made an effort to appear presentable before coming to find me. Daniel's gaze darkened when he saw Liam. Liam shot me a complicated look, and I smiled faintly. "Liam, lend me your arm for a moment," I said casually. Liam, ever the sharp observer, walked toward Daniel before I could say another word. Without hesitation, he gently brushed the stray strands of hair from my forehead, his expression tender and natural, before turning to Daniel as if nothing had happened. "What brings you here, Mr. Wallace?" Daniel's eyes flicked between Liam and me. After a long silence, it was as if something clicked in his mind. He let out a bitter laugh and said, "So Mr. Chen canceled the deal to please his lover? You two have been in cahoots from the start, haven't you?" "No, that's not true," I said hastily. Meeting Daniel's gaze, for a fleeting moment I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "It's not a lover," I said, dragging out the words with a mix of pride and mischief. "It's the girl he likes." Liam chuckled softly, his laughter carrying an ambiguous undertone. Worried he might undermine me, I clung tighter to his arm. "Though your accusations are off the mark, I don't mind how they sound," Liam said. "After all, business isn't personal. Don't lose hope, Mr. Wallace. Perhaps there will be opportunities to collaborate in the future." Daniel's face twitched, realizing how poorly he measured up to Liam. After a moment of silence, he turned and began to leave. "Daniel," I called after him. "Are you in trouble? Do you need my help?" He froze mid-step, standing still for what felt like an eternity before finally turning around. His pride had clearly taken a beating. "I just want to know," he said hoarsely. "Did you ever truly love me?" I sighed wistfully, as if regretting my answer. "I don't think I ever did." His pupils dilated, the truth striking him like a blow. "Your timing is unfortunate," I added, glancing at Liam. "My boyfriend is right here. Do you want to start an argument between us?" Liam interjected smoothly, his voice soft yet ringing with emotion. "Oh, we won't argue. But I do feel sorry for you, Miss Hayes, having had to deal with someone like him." His eyes shimmered with a mix of light and warmth as he gazed at me. Daniel's shoulders slumped, and he lowered his head, looking utterly defeated. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The Wallace family declared bankruptcy shortly afterward. Daniel's father ended up in prison. Meanwhile, Stella and her mother, sensing the impending disaster, filed for divorce just in time. They fled abroad with their money, leaving Daniel, the illegitimate son, with nothing but piles of debt. "Do you hate Daniel because of love turned to resentment?" Liam asked casually one day after a business meeting. I paused, caught off guard, before slumping back onto the couch with a laugh. "That's a bit dramatic," I replied. "I can't think of any other reason. You seem to care about him a lot, but all those little dramas of yours, you've practically driven him to ruin." Liam's curiosity was evident, his interest oddly persistent. "I did stir the pot a little," I admitted with a smirk. "I undermined his relationship with Stella's mother, incited the company's higher-ups to oppose his promotion, fanned the flames of internal conflicts, and reported their fraudulent accounting practices. But none of that was because of love or hatred." Liam raised an eyebrow, his intrigue growing. "On the contrary," I continued, "it's because he hated me for no reason. I couldn't let him rise too high or gain too much. If I told you that Daniel becomes dangerous when he's rich, and it's safer for society when he's broke, would you believe me?" Liam chuckled, amused by my seriousness. "I'm telling the truth," I said, leaning forward. "The saying, 'A wolf in the mountains becomes reckless when fed,' fits him perfectly." Still, life hadn't been easy for me either. Investigating and cutting ties with those freeloading relatives in the company had upset them, and they found creative ways to pressure me into marriage. They kept introducing potential suitors, as if marrying me off would turn me into an outsider, severing my control over the family business. My mother, overwhelmed by hosting 3 waves of relatives a day, finally had enough. She pointed to Liam and declared, "My daughter already has a boyfriend in the investment world. They'll get married soon." The news spread like wildfire through the business community. I privately apologized to Liam, but to my surprise, he seemed quite pleased with the situation. "If you're willing," he said, "we can go to the marriage registry anytime." My treat. Terrified, I shook my head vigorously. The scars left by my 8 years of marriage in my previous life were still too fresh, too indelible. This time I only wanted to live freely, following my own heart. Liam suddenly leaned in, his gaze burning into mine. In ancient times, saving someone's life meant you owed them your own. How can you be so ungrateful? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. We're business partners. You can either focus on money or romance, but not both. He straightened up, laughing softly. You're so smart. Why not do both? I hesitated, caught off guard, before eventually laughing along. Maybe it's worth a shot. I'm only in my 20s. I can't let the best years of my life go to waste. The shared economy concept I introduced gained massive traction in the market. Once it peaked, I quickly cashed out and exited the stage, leaving no regrets behind. From then on, I shadowed Liam, learning everything I could, and gradually grew into an independent investor, leveraging the insights and foresight from my previous life. I focused on identifying high-potential projects and helping talented but resource-starved individuals realize their dreams. In just a few years, I gained widespread recognition and made a name for myself without relying on the Hayes Corporation as a shield anymore. I had become my parents' fallback for the future instead. Teaching a student too well might starve the teacher, and Liam sometimes felt like he was being taken advantage of. He'd occasionally get dramatic about it, but I had my own way of making him happy. I'd simply step forward and silence his complaints with a kiss that never failed to lift his mood. And I quite enjoyed feeding his ego in such a pleasant way. At the end of the year, I traveled to a small third-tier city for business and unexpectedly ran into Isabel. She was unrecognizable from before. Her appearance had completely transformed. Dressed in expensive clothes and radiating confidence, she seemed to glow with a newfound charm. On a whim, I struck up a conversation about Daniel. Why didn't you end up with Daniel? In my previous life, Daniel's hatred for me stemmed from Isabel's death. But in this life, after being separated from him, Isabel was alive and well. I was genuinely curious about the entanglement between the two of them and how I had somehow gotten caught in the crossfire. Isabel hesitated for a moment, then gave me a bitter smile. She explained, "Back then I relied on Daniel for everything, emotionally and financially. I was terrified of losing him, and I couldn't imagine a life without him. To me, he was the one holding up my sky. Whenever I thought about him being taken away, it felt like my entire world was about to collapse." She paused, then continued with a tinge of regret. But I could never bring myself to tell Daniel about my fears. I knew he didn't have the patience to deal with my emotions. My world revolved around him, but his world was so much bigger. The only thing I had going for me was my obedience, so I always supported him unconditionally, even when he wanted to use you, even when he refused to give me a proper title, even when he sent me back to my hometown. I never complained. After leaving him for good, I realized the sky wouldn't actually fall. My world became bigger and I didn't have to carry so much anymore. If I had stayed with him, I think my life would have only had two possible outcomes. Either dying from suffocation or going insane from frustration. She looked at me apologetically. "Chloe, I'm sorry. Back then I should have spoken up, even if it was just to give you a heads up. Maybe you wouldn't have wasted so much time and emotion on him." So that was the truth. In my previous life, Daniel had shamelessly juggled two relationships, completely disregarding Isabel's feelings. Isabel, his supposed first love, could only watch from the shadows as Daniel flaunted our seemingly perfect relationship. She swallowed all her pain and resentment until she couldn't take it anymore, and chose to end her life by jumping into the sea. Unable to accept her death, Daniel shifted all the blame onto me. In his mind, I should never have existed, never have tempted him into wrongdoing. He built a moral pedestal in his heart, casting judgment on me, another victim, just to deceive himself. He told himself that he had truly loved Isabel, that he was forced into his actions, and that he would never forget her for the rest of his life. He needed to believe he was a good man, a romantic soul. Fortunately, this time around, both Isabel and I escaped unscathed. Meanwhile, Daniel's life fell apart. He was penniless, homeless, and constantly on the run. At his lowest point, debt collectors broke his legs and threw him into the sea, leaving him on the brink of death. It wasn't as if he hadn't tried to seek my help. He had staked out near my company building and even my home, but I managed to avoid him every time. Later, as the gap between us grew too vast, he couldn't find any information about me anymore. However, I could always keep tabs on him. For example, I recently learned that he had taken a job as a rideshare driver. Unfortunately for him, a kid had stuck a sticker on his license plate without him noticing, and when he drove off, his license points were completely deducted. I looked up at the distant sky with a small smile. Those who betray genuine love, how could they expect a happy ending? On my 30th birthday, Liam proposed to me at a seaside hotel. Months earlier, I had already discovered the prenuptial agreement he'd prepared. I knew what he was planning and had given it considerable thought. By then I had my answer. But when the moment finally came, I summoned all my acting skills to feign surprise, delight, and even panic before slowly shaking my head. With a tinge of sadness I said, "You know I don't like marriage contracts. I don't like being bound by responsibilities." He remained on one knee for a long moment. Then without warning he stood, grabbed my arms and kissed me. The scent of plum wine lingered on his lips as he murmured indistinctly, "Then do you like me? I want a title. I need one." Leaning back I couldn't help but laugh and scolded him. "Stop acting like this. You're behaving like a child begging for candy." He let go of me, but the dangerous glint in his amber eyes only grew stronger. "Fine, fine," he said, his tone slow and magnetic. "No more childish games. Let's try something more mature." His eyes smoldered with intensity as his long fingers deftly untied his tie. First he wrapped it around one of my wrists, then the other, binding them together and raising them above my head. He leaned down, his chin resting on my hair, his body radiating heat. "Chloe, listen to me carefully," he whispered, his voice deep and commanding. "I'll give you love and freedom. Take it. Enjoy it. Love is fleeting and unpredictable, impossible to guard against. Perhaps it's better to embrace the emotions of the moment and cherish the rare, impulsive feelings that become harder to find as we grow older." With a hoarse voice I agreed. By late spring in May, the Hayes Corporation hosted a grand wedding, lavish and filled with notable guests. Dressed in a flowing wedding gown with a long train, I walked through a path lined with blooming flowers. Under the gaze of family and friends, I approached the groom, Liam. His eyes were red as he gently took my hand and kissed it, a single tear slipping from his lowered gaze. But when he straightened, his expression lit up with a dazzling smile, bold and full of life. "I told you," he said with a teasing grin. "A life-saving favor demands a lifelong repayment. There's no escaping my wife." The end. Thank you for joining Chloe on her full journey of rebirth, vengeance, and love. If you enjoyed this story and want to catch the next series, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more content.